me know when I need to share the screen, and I can do that for both of you guys, okay?
Okay, are you gonna let me know to do the choices? Or?
Yeah, once I change it.
Okay.
I don't think so. Are we supposed to record this?
I am. It's
You are?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
Okay, so
I'm good.
okay, who's getting started?
There's another person.
The housekeeping is gonna have to be left till the end because Adele's in with Leon, so we're just gonna jump right to Leslie.
Yes. Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay, I'm trying to, have you got a screen that you have choices there?
Yeah, do you want us to put it up, Leslie?
I was trying to just get one here. I'm trying to just set it up so that I have a blank screen to share, and maybe everybody can look at it there. But I'm having problems creating a file. Give me one moment, please. Sorry about that. Okay, anyway, there we go. Perfect. Okay, so the first topic that I wanted to share with everybody is that of career planning. And we basically use choices, although I know Russ is maybe going to speak to some other testing options that are available for us. But for the purpose of working with the client base that we have and dog search, this program has been the most effective. Have any of you used choices for career planning or active job search with your clients? No. And I can't hear anybody.
Did you say no, Amanda?
No.
No. Okay. This is basically, I don't want to be just sitting here and talking at you. I really want some input. So can you share with me what process you have for your career planning?
In terms of searching for all talks and assisting with job search?
In terms of whatever you do from starting from square one, you have an individual who has been determined. This individual is very motivated and is really taking a lot of initiative to re-career and return to the workforce. What is your first step?
My first step would be to review and rebuild their resume if necessary.
Okay.
And then we would discuss career options that they would be interested in. And then I would start reviewing job boards, job postings, telephone book, that type of thing.
Okay, very good. Help me understand an individual who's been a farmer all his life. He's not able to return to that pre-injury assessment and has no idea as to what's even out there. He's never ever looked at or even contemplated working in another field.
Can you guys hear me?
I can kind of hear you, Steph.
Oh, can anyone else hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay. So kind of going back to the choices question, Leslie, that you had, I personally have used it to kind of navigate and just gather ideas for clients who might be interested in pursuing different types of occupations. So I use it as a starting point and kind of narrow down based on all of the profiles and the checklists that we administer to kind of just give them a picture of what the program spits out, and we kind of just start from there and go through that entire list of occupations that Choices is suggesting that's appropriate for them.
Perfect. Okay, so, and that's what I'm trying to get at, is that this is a great tool for us to use in conjunction with your client. So if you go to choose a guideway, and it is in the middle of your choices screen, Russ,
Yep.
are you able to, okay, so, do you see where it says, I can't read it that far.
Guideway.
My guideway. So basically what that will do is create your client's guideway. And if you take a look for adults in career transition, post-secondary students, high school students, it allows you to select, here, Pamela. Here, put it beside you. So, sorry, hang on for a second so you can see this. It allows you to be able to use those areas that best match what it is that your client is, what arena he's in. So let's say that we have an individual who has limited recent work experiences. Russ, can you click on that one for us, please? So in this area, and it's already concluded that your client will have gone through the transferable work content skills, the interest profile, as well as the ability profile. So those are all things that you can add into this particular portion of the choices. Okay, do you want to just click on, do you have an actual test up there? Do you have an actual client up there, Russ?
We don't.
Oh, okay. So I just want to, if you can just, everybody take a look at that and scroll through and see if you have any questions there. So basically what we would do is upload all the documents that we have for the client. We would be in the client's .chs or the client's choices file. And then you could go into that occupation database.
You want me to click on it, Leslie, or you just tell me what you want?
Yeah, you can click on it to help.
Okay.
Take a look. And so then in conjunction with your client, you can go through as many of those topics. On the bottom portion of your screen, there are all those topics. And we use, actually, when we are looking at Saskatchewan government insurance clients, we use 19 of those topics. And we'll talk about that at a later time. But basically with your client, you can go through each one of these individually. And it gives you a really good, it kind of like Stephanie says, narrows down that occupational search that you would want to provide for your client. I think it's a good way to start.
Can I click on one here, like physical demands, Leslie?
Sure, go ahead, yes.
And so again, I'll let you take it from here, but if we had a client that really was injured significantly and was only sedentary, then we could click on sedentary.
Absolutely.
And then hit
OK. And then up in the top, you would use only, sorry Russ, if you can go back to that one.
Yeah.
And click on it again.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure that you, up in the top, not only where you have your physical demands of light, medium, and heavy, you want to ensure that you only match the selected factors. You want to click that always. Do you see that that one? Okay. Right. And then you just say okay, and then that will move that particular topic. It'll start to minimize your search topics.
Because it starts out, Leslie, with 995 occupational categories, correct?
Correct.
And you can see
99,900 occupational alternates.
Yeah, and you can see by just putting in one search topic, it's eliminated 450 jobs. And the more search topics you put in, the smaller that will get down to. It'll shortlist it.
Absolutely. So it really helps your client to focus, but not only that, on another token, when we are looking at using this for change of definition or determination, it also narrows down those alternate occupations for us. Does anybody have any questions about this?
Not so far.
Not so far. Okay. I think that, when it comes to career planning, particularly where there are individuals that don't have any idea as to what they can do, what they want to do, where their interests are, this is a really good place to start, and it really gets your client to own their career direction. Okay? I don't have any other comments about career planning. Can you, in Saskatoon, or anybody help me understand what other options we would have for any of the clients that we work with regards to career planning?
Russ, do you have any examples that you can give?
I'm just trying to think of career planning, like Amanda said, if I'm doing career planning, which is helping the person with a job search, correct, Leslie?
Indeed.
Right, we're not looking at the determination necessarily, we're looking at helping this client in the real world. No,
That is correct.
okay? So as Amanda said, important to do the resume, get that up to snuff. And often the person will want to pursue something perhaps that isn't, the determined occupation. So you want to understand what they want to do. I'll kind of go over that in the interest profile because the client often identifies some interest areas that are very good to pursue with them. And I'll get into that in a little bit, but I think it's develop that resume. It's a twofold approach. Whenever I look at job searching, it's twofold. It's trying to look at jobs that are vacant, that employers have put an ad out on Kijiji or SAS Jobs or Indeed or Monster, but it's also identifying cold calling, jobs that haven't been listed. 85% of jobs are gotten that way, and a lot of our clients don't want to do that, but it is imperative to get them to understand that that's the hidden job market. Does that make sense, Leslie?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
When I explain a job search to somebody, it is twofold. The easy way is to look at jobs that are posted, but you have to be proactive instead of reactive, and I always use that phrase. Proactive is doing the cold calls, going through a phone book or going online, Googling a job and applying for it, even though the employer may not be looking for somebody right now. You want that resume in their file drawer so that if and when somebody gets fired or a position opens up, that hopefully they're not going to put an ad in the paper, they're going to phone you because your resume is in their file drawer. Because once that job goes online, goes on to SAS Jobs or Kijiji, you're up against much more competition. And that's the type of conversation I have with clients a lot of times. And it's the tough sell. I don't know, Leslie, if you have a hard time selling the cold call idea. I had a guy in this week and he just wants to apply for jobs that are available, that exist, that are available, that are vacant, because he doesn't want to waste his time dropping off resumes because employers don't keep them. They throw them out. And I would disagree with that. What's your thought?
Well, I mean, I have very active, very, very proactive clients. I'm very fortunate right now in my client base. Those people are actually taking their resumes out and doing that cold calling themselves. They're actually going to, they're setting up a geographical area where they will go to employer XYZ and ask to speak to human resource or whoever is there that does the hiring and leave their resumes there.
And that's perfect.
Sorry.
That's ideal.
Absolutely. I just wanted to mention one other scenario with this career planning. I don't know if you've ever been asked to do feasibility studies. And this would be, in your hierarchy when you're looking at same job, same employer, different job, same employer, different job, different employer, retraining or self-employment, right? And I would say probably 3 to 4 times a year, we are requested here by Saskatchewan Government Insurance to do what they call a feasibility study. So we actually go in and take a look at how viable is it to retrain an individual. So if they have an individual who is a very high income earner and who is very young and has a number of decades left in the workforce, is it financially viable and is it economically viable for them to retrain an individual? Is that something that you folks do in Saskatoon as well?
We really don't, Leslie. And I think we should do more of that. especially when we know that when we determine somebody, and I'll give you an example, I'll use round numbers. Let's say that the person's getting a GYI of $60,000, and we determine that person into a $30,000 a year job. Now they're told that they have a 1-year grace period before they're reduced that $30,000, correct?
Right.
Let's say that the person's 30 years old. They have 35 years left in the workforce, and you'd start doing the math on 30 grand top up, because 60 minus 30 is, they're still gonna get the 30 grand unless they go out and find work for more than 30 grand. But I think I don't think we do it enough here, looking at the retraining part, because we wait that year, the person doesn't find anything, now SGI still owes them 30 grand, and then they look at the retraining. I wouldn't wait that long, but how's it work in the South?
Well, I mean, and you know what, those are all really valid points. I think that, and don't forget that there's that cost of living index that comes in every year, right?
Yeah.
So within 5 or 6 years, this individual who was reduced by $30,000 could be back up and receiving, $40,000. It doesn't take long for them to climb back up with that cost of living increase.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, is it, in situations like this, and those of you who have close relationships with your personal injury representatives, do you think it's a viable option to discuss feasibility studies with them, to have already some pre-information that would give them an idea as to what they're looking at over the next 35 years?
I think that's a great idea, and just to piggyback on the in-service that we had, and it was a really good in-service with Stacy and Joanne last week, is that they want to be involved from beginning to end in the RCE process. So I would agree, Leslie, that as a VOC rehab here and there, we should maybe be doing a three-way in terms of a conference with Stacy and the PIR to talk about the benefits, if there are any, of looking at retraining. But involve the medical facilitator, whether it's Joanne or Stacy.
Yeah, and I think maybe before you go, because it is very timely to put those reports together, because not only do you do the scholastic costs and timeframes, but you also need to do labor markets, projected labor markets, which could be 3 or 4 years down the road, depending on the program that you're looking at suggesting for your client, right?
Yes.
So you may want to have just a little bit of a discussion before they say to you, okay, well, go ahead and get me some information. Like you want approval to do that. And then once you gather that, then I think your three-way is really a good thing.
Leslie, are you able to send us, you've done a few, it would be valuable if we had a sample of what that report looks like, if you could send it to us. Just to,
sure, we've got lots of them.
Sterilize it or, whatever, but I think that would be great to have.
Are these I'm concluding these are for internal use only, correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. You know what, honestly, men and women, our ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to sterilize them. I'm going to send them to you for your information.
That'd be great.
Okay, how many do you want?
Give us a 2, just 2.
Okay.
I'm guessing they pretty much look the same, but if there's 2 that are kind of different in some regards, send us 2 of them. And that'll be good, because I think that needs to start to take place here. I see a couple of files that, the person doesn't want to work, they're letting the 1-year grace period slip, and they're going to get a huge top up still at the end of the 1-year grace.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a good way, to kind of insert Bridges Health with, again, another service that we can provide for those personal injury representatives, because I don't know about Saskatoon, but I know in Regina we've had a huge turnover of PIRs, and they may not be knowledgeable about those feasibility studies and the potential to retrain and when those options are considered.
Yes.
Okay. Any comments, any feedback, anything with regards to career planning?
I think that with regards to retraining, with us in Saskatoon anyways, I want to encourage you guys to have those conversations with the PIRs. I know it seems like a lot of them aren't very open to the idea, but at least if we're having that conversation, it's out there. I know that they don't want it in writing, so I mean, avoid putting it in a report until you have formal approval to go ahead with anything, but still have those conversations. And if they don't want to pursue it, then that's up to them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Leslie, can I ask, I'm just curious, in the South, when was the last time you were asked to set up retraining for somebody? Because I know, and Steph, you can chime in here, but I know I haven't done it for years. I haven't been asked to do it for years.
We just had a client who completed, well, who actually completed the courses. It wasn't successful in getting his certification or his diploma because he dropped one course, but he just finished his program in April of 2016.
2-year program.
Yep.
Nice. I think, as Steph said, I think it's worthwhile talking about, not putting in a report, but talking about it at least, and realizing that 90% of the time, 95% of the time, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and you know what, I surprise you with, because maybe it's the fact that we're not talking about it, that it doesn't happen, because it rarely ever happens in Saskatoon. I did one report that was, it was similar to what you're talking about, Leslie, with the feasibility studies. We called it a cost-benefit analysis. I've only done one of those ever, and that individual was retrained, and then with another individual, they were looking at retraining, but it did not go through. And so there's only been really 1.5 that I've ever seen myself.
We do, in the South, we've done probably about 3 feasibility studies a year. Where the client actually is, is put into retraining. I guess it's just a matter of, I don't know, again, the differences between the South and the North, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and if there's no other comments, can we move on to the next topic? How are we doing time-wise?
We're okay.
Okay. Okay. So, determination or change of definition. Can y'all explain, can you explain your understanding of those terms?
Anybody? Well, change of definition, from my understanding, is they're no longer required to go back to their own occupation. It's any occupation.
Okay. And determination? Did we lose everybody?
We're right here. Can you not see us?
I can see Stephanie. Nope. No.
Going back to the choices.
Nope, I can't see you.
We can see Stephanie and ourselves.
I can't see the boardroom anymore.
Yeah, no, they're gone from us too.
Are they?
We can hear you. Leslie, we can hear you, but I lost choices. I'm just going back into it.
There we go. Okay, can you help me understand your understanding of the terminology determination?
I'll answer that.
Okay.
Determination for SGI, Leslie?
Yes, they're the only ones actually in all the insurance companies across Canada that use that terminology.
So this is the way I would define it or talk about it. A determination happens when the individual, the customer, has been injured to the point where they cannot return to their pre-accident job, and an alternative occupational category needs to be chosen in order to determine an occupational category that they can do that's linked to an income level, because SGI wants to find out what their capacity is, income-wise, so that they can reduce them, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly perfect, because what happens, as Joanne explained, is that it's the act, the regulation states that they have the right to mitigate their costs, right? Their expenses. So in order to be able to do that, they have a process that they need to go through. And part of that process is what they're now deeming as the transferable transferable skills analysis. I just drew a blank there. So that's where, you know, the service providers are brought in to do the vocational testing with the end goal of selecting 3 alternate occupations and a best fit, and 3 labor markets to match that best fit alternate occupation. Okay, in those cases, we within Bridges Health use choices for that process. And we're going to go more in depth next week about choices and what we look at in, again, those 19 topics. The change of definition is what is used by other insurers. And excuse me, usually, and this has been my experience, and I'm open to hearing everybody else's experience, is that when, for example, Blue Cross come to us and say, this individual has a change of definition coming up, which means that his or her pre-illness or pre-injury employment is no longer going to be available to him or her. They need to look at other occupations that, or any occupation that this individual could complete. They normally don't require labor market, and they usually end the benefits on the day the report is received.
Leslie, can I ask you about the time frame? I know that the RCE is usually done after 2 years. Is the change of definition the same? Is it a 2-year time frame?
It depends on the insurance company in my experience.
It does depend on the insurer. In most cases, the insurers that I've worked with are Sun Life, Blue Cross, RBC, oh my goodness.
What about 3S Health?
3S Health also have a 2-year demarcation. If you look in your referrals, you'll see that date of disability, right? And then they also have a change of definition date on there as well. Am I correct,
It's
Pamela?
right on the referral, what that date is. Even if it's past, they have it on there. If it's projected, it's on there.
What did you say?
At least the ones that we're receiving.
2 years, 190
Right.
days for 3S Health.
2 years.
But I have run into an insurance company, and I can't remember which one it was, but it was a 3-year.
Well, Amanda just said too that her understanding is, working on the 3S Health files, is that it's 2 years, 119 days. And I'm just bringing it up just for reference for people to understand when these occur. An RCE is usually 2 years, and the person has to have reached maximum medical improvement. Anyways, I don't want to get too mixed up here.
And that's the SGI process, right?
Yeah.
But I guess at the end of the day, what I would like everybody to take away from this is whether it's a change of definition or a determination, the process that we use going through our choices and our vocational testing is exactly the same. Has that been your experience, Russ? Is that what you do when you work with Blue Cross or any other insurance clients?
I haven't worked with Blue Cross. I've worked with 3S Health. 3S Health hasn't really, I've had maybe 20 files, and I think I've only done voc testing on 1. They don't have to do much voc testing.
That opens up another good area of discussion, because when you have an individual that's a 3S Health client and their pre-illnesses don't allow them to return, and you have medical evidence which is objective that says, no, this individual cannot return to this line of work, they need to seek something else. That's an opportunity that I always take to provide and recommend vocational testing to seek out alternate occupations.
And are you referring to 3S Health and others?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's a good idea. It's to date though, I haven't, and I don't think Amanda or Scott have been asked to do much voc testing, but I think it is, as you said, an opportunity when they can't return to the type of work they were doing to suggest or recommend that would be prudent, that would be beneficial.
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I actually have a client right now, so this is a good conversation, because I have a client with 3S Health. It's been identified she cannot return to her nursing position, and so I'm still waiting to hear back from the employer to see what they're doing. And from what I understand from Shelley, they they often don't really care or do too much to get this individual back to work. And so this is maybe something I can look at recommending that we do some vocational testing. If the employer is not really making any efforts to place them, then that will give us an idea of what kind of alternate occupation we could put her in. I didn't even think of that for 3S Health Office, so that's.
I just finished one with 3S Health and doing vocational testing for the purpose of exploring alternate occupations, and we got right down to the customer buying in, and then the customer didn't buy in, and the doctor said no, she can't return in any capacity until September of 2017. But it's there, the alternate occupation, they like a little report, they don't require labor market, just if in the South, in this case, just a number of alternate occupations that the client has knowledge, skills, and abilities to complete, and a definition, a small definition of what that would look like. So there's another option for 3S Health, other recommendations that we can provide, right?
I've got a couple that are in that role, so.
Leslie, would you be able to send examples of reports that you have done for 3S Health or TSA?
Yeah. Except we don't call, I don't think we refer to them as transferable skills. We're yeah. 3S Health for, and I don't need to sanitize them, right?
No.
No.
Thank you.
With the government, they call it redacting.
Redacting.
I'm just like, I think I've been in a meeting like several times and they said the word redacting. I'm like, I don't even know what that means. Can somebody clue me in?
Okay, I'll get those to you as well. Okay, so any questions, any concerns about determination or change of definition, when it's used, how it's used, what it looks like?
Leslie, do we want to talk about section 134 at this point? Because it is a big part of the determination process.
I think that's good, and that was going to be part of your,
Okay.
that was going to be part of your tests and assessments, right? So do you want to speak to section 134 now?
I think so. I think so, because we're talking about determination. So when we, and this is strictly SGI. This is SGI that has this section in their act, and it's section 134, and it talks about what is taken into consideration to determine an occupation. And I'll read it. I've got it in front of me. It says, in determining an employment pursuant to subsection 119.4 or section 132, blah, blah, the insurer shall consider the following factors if applicable. Here they are. This is what we base our TSAs on, labor market survey, the determined occupation. The client's current education, training, work experience, and physical and intellectual abilities. And it actually goes on to say at the time of the determination, which is, so in other words, what we're looking at here is, it doesn't say anything about interests, but these are the things that if it ever goes to appeal, this is what our foundation is based on, why we selected the job or jobs that we did or occupational categories that we did. It's based on those criteria or those factors, and that's huge. Correct, Leslie?
Indeed it is. Thank you very much for sharing that. We actually put in the last paragraph of our report, we actually quote the NOC title, the NOC number, and then based on section 134, and we outline that actual act. Do you put that in your reports?
I do.
Okay, good enough. I wanted to bring up a scenario for you. This is a real case because Pamela and I experienced this the other day, and this is the first time in all my IRC and British Health career that I've ever experienced this. So we speak to the education, we speak to the training, we speak to career history, right?
Yes.
Those are the items that we take into consideration when we explore alternate occupations and come up with the best match.
Yes.
Help me understand what you would do in the event that your client has no career history, has never worked in his life, ever.
Are they, there you go. Is this person young and they haven't established a work history? Like they're 18 or 17 or?
Yes, 19.
19.
Okay. I would ask about volunteer work. Again, if they volunteered anywhere. I think it's also important to discuss their education and the marks they had in school and what subjects they liked, because those are things that maybe will tell us what type of work they could or want to pursue in the future.
Well, school hasn't been completed yet. Still in school.
Okay.
Cooking is not one of them. I don't like that class.
So how do you speak to section 134 when you're missing one of the huge components for SGI's ability to determine an individual?
You can't. It doesn't mean that everything gets thrown out, but because the person doesn't have a work history, it's a factor you consider, but if it's not there to consider, then you look at the other ones, probably more weight in terms of their testing, their aptitude testing, their
traumatic brain injury.
Brain injury?
Traumatic.
I guess I would look at the neuropsych report and what they're interested in. Suddenly the interest profile becomes maybe more valuable because in section 134 again, it has nothing to do with what the person's interested in.
But, you know, as Pamela just said, 134 doesn't speak to the interest or actually to any of the vocational testing. We speak to it individually in each of those alternate occupations as to why we selected it or explored it. But section 134 does not speak to interest, ability, or transferable work content skills. And I'm not playing devil's advocate or being a meanie here, Russ. I mean, I'm really trying to understand how is this going to go forward?
Sure. I'm just wondering too about work trials, because I know a lot of times when we have an acquired brain injury person, we'll look at putting together a work trial. I guess your question is, how do we determine what type of work trial? Like what venue?
No, my question is how can Saskatchewan Government Insurance move forward with a determination when we're missing one of the huge factors? And as a matter of fact, when I spoke to the client about transferable work content skills, he has none.
Leslie?
I would ask the personal injury rep and provide them that information and say exactly what you said, Leslie, and that we have discussed in detail the information that we have, and it's come to our attention that this individual does not have any work history or transferable work content. How would you like us to proceed? Are you able to proceed in terms of your processes with the determination process? And I would look to the insurer, frankly, to gather more direction from them.
And actually, in this case, what I did, because the client indicated that he didn't have any volunteerism, he didn't have any transferable skills, I didn't see the value in having him go through that assessment. So my professional decision was to not have him complete that particular appendix of the transferable work content skills.
Why SGI would be going down a determination road, like if and what their IRB is based on it and what your GYI that you need to focus on and where in the hierarchy this is all falling, because if you were working with an individual that didn't have a career and wasn't working at the time of the accident, what are you determining them into? Like, what goal is SGI needing to meet?
Their goal, quite frankly, is to ensure that there is some alternate occupation out there, whether it's on a part-time basis or a full-time, likely a part-time for this individual, and that he's not going to get placed into that industrial category, which is around $46,000 a year.
So Leslie, going back to section 134, my question would be then, and it reads education, training, work experience. This person doesn't have any of those. And physical, we've got that information probably on the person. But I get to intellectual. I've always kind of been confused on that. Does that have to do with our aptitude testing through choices? Or is that something that we derive from the neuropsych that the person would have?
That's exactly right, the latter. Our aptitude testing is not an intelligence quotient test. It's not an IQ. It's specifically aptitudes that speak to various skills and levels that are required to complete jobs and tasks in our working community. The neuropsych will address the individual's intellectual ability. So when you use that word, you would have reviewed the neuropsychs. And likely when we're in the determination process, there's probably two of them, right? One that would have been done pretty recent post-injury, and then another one that would be more recent and closer to the determination or to the residual capacity evaluation.
So let me ask you this question, Pamela. This is a client that you have, Pamela, a traumatic brain injured person?
No, it's Leslie's client, but I was attending for training purposes.
Okay. I guess I'm just thinking through what I would do with this person. You know, like you said, Leslie and Pamela, you know, the person hasn't really worked anywhere, doesn't have any transferable skills, doesn't have much education or training. They didn't finish school.
He is finishing.
Okay, so they're finishing. I guess I would put a lot of weight in that neuropsych report, and I know that we do a lot of work trials here, and I guess I would want to try and find a work trial that person would want to do. And here's the dicey part, is that section 134 doesn't talk about interests, but a brain injured person, you know, you've got to find something they're interested in. If you don't have education, you don't have work experience or transferable skills, you can't, there's nothing there. You have to go to the next criteria, next factor. You can't create them. Like, what's your thought on setting up work trials? Because we do a lot of them here. SGI won't even get us to do a labor market survey. Steph, and maybe you can chime in on this. But my understanding and my experience is that if the person's got a brain injury, 95% of the time SGI says, brain injury, we want you to do a work trial to find out about fatigue and how long they can work, then do the labor market survey afterwards. Steph, have you had that happen or not? Or
ones that I've worked with most recently, the instruction that I've been given actually has been backwards, because the PIR has actually told me that they would like the labor market done first, because they've had experiences where a work trial is done first, and then we go and do the labor market, and that job doesn't exist. So they can't plug it into an alternate occupation category. So the ones that I have done has been a labor market first, and then potentially a work trial to see if that individual is successful in that position. So mine have not gone the other way. I know that there have been ones done kind of backwards, and the work trial has been done initially, but the most recent ones that I've had with brain injured clients, I've actually been requested to do the labor market survey first because of that reason.
So I think I just want to go back to what Leslie's question is, I think, Leslie, and your question really is, here's what I've got in this particular file. I've got a person that has a severe brain injury, is trying to finish school, hasn't worked before, and I want to adhere to the determination process. How do I rationalize what the determined occupation is going to be for this person? Am I close? Yeah? Mm-hmm. So I guess I'm just looking at section 134, and I read it, and it just says the insured at the time of the determination shall consider the following factors. So yes, we consider work experience, doesn't have any. I mean, you just have to move on to the next one. How much education do they have? What are they doing right now? They're trying to finish their grade 12, probably. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Physically, you'll know what their function is. I mean, there's probably some functional stuff that they have deficits because of the brain injury, I'm guessing. But the big one,
Yes.
again, the big one cognitively is that neuropsych report. But I still think these people can be determined into an occupation even though they don't have the work experience. We have to consider it, but there's nothing to consider. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Or?
It does, it does. I just wondered if anybody had ever run into that. I have not experienced that. So what I did under section 134, because I did not have this client complete the transferable skills, the transferable work content skill assessment, I just removed career history from every reference why I selected an alternate occupation. And now it's the Saskatchewan government's insurance issue as to whether or not they can determine this individual.
So I can speak to that. I had a couple of instances where I had clients either decline completely to do one portion of the testing or the other. And that's exactly what happened, Leslie. Like you said, I put a disclaimer in my report that what I was suggesting is based only on the tests that I had administered, and that either the aptitude portion was missing or whatever they had declined to do. It then became a compliance issue with SGI, and one individual they sent back to me 4 times to have the testing completed, and the other I mean, it's up to them how they want to take it. If it's a compliance issue or if they'll just pursue it with information present. But both of those times they sent the individuals back to me.
Yeah, and this individual is already going to be, he's already scheduled for his residual capacity evaluation. So it's going forward. I wanted to make a comment about the work trials, and that used to be something, you know, back 4 or 5 years, work trials and work placements were huge. And I really am uncomfortable with work trials, particularly if they're predetermination, because if your client is unsuccessful, you know, how then do you move forward? I would prefer to see myself work trial post-determination, where you're not actually looking at a work trial in that determined occupation, but maybe a work trial where your client is expressing an interest. There's a difference.
There is.
Like I say.
That's a good point, Leslie, because it certainly doesn't look good if we do the work trial and they let's say they sabotage, or they don't sabotage, but the bottom line is that at the end of the work trial, they were unsuccessful. How can you move forward then trying to determine that person into that? That's damning evidence, especially at the appeal level.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this work trial and work placement is not even, it's not even a phrase that's used here in the South anymore.
Okay,
If you can get rid of it until post-determination, that would be really beneficial for you folks.
just so you guys know, we have 10 minutes left, so I'm not sure how far down we are. I have to make some time for Adele at the very end.
And Leslie, let me just ask you too, Leslie, if we don't get to me today, could I go next week? Is this part of, I could start into it, but I'm thinking that I'd like to get into the 3 components of choices. I don't know whether we're gonna have enough time to do it now. I would come back next week and do it.
I'm good with that, Kristen. Russ can go on. Those three things will fit in with the next week too. Choices, what can it do for you?
Okay, perfect.
Is everybody okay with that?
Yep.
I just want to speak really quickly to reliability and validity. And you know, when we look at testing, we always look at reliability and validity. And the thing that gives our testing and our results and our reports that actual appeal proof, shall we say, is the fact that we are providing these in the same consistent manner, not only each and every time that we meet with a client, but also provincially. So in order, it's kind of like that ISO 12,000, that if SGI or anybody else, an auditor, was to pick out a report from any of the individuals who've gone through the vocational testing, they would see that the process is the same each and every time that we meet with a client to do vocational testing for determination purposes. So Russ and I were speaking about this yesterday. I just wanted to confirm that we're all on the same page, that we actually run the ability profile first, the transferable work content skills is the second, and the interest profile is the last assessment that we provide.
Now,
Is that what you got?
Leslie, I don't always do it in that order, and I'll tell you why. When I sit down with a person, it may be the first time I've sat down with them, and I want to build rapport. What I've found is that sometimes people are nervous about doing a test. And the three components, there is really only one test. There's two checklists and one test. Sometimes
That's correct.
defer that test to the last thing or the middle. What I want to do with that person is make them at ease, and what I'll do with them is usually do the interest checklist, because it's stuff that they want to do. And they seem to relax then. But if I get them doing a time test within 10 minutes of meeting them, or 15 minutes, sometimes it's just not the best way to warm up to them. I don't do it that way all the time, but that's an example of when I wouldn't do the aptitude test at the beginning. If I feel that they're very test anxious, they don't want to do that one first. If they're standoffish, I want to develop a rapport.
Okay, well, in these situations, are we not doing pre-assessment interviews?
I'll do sometimes I'll do that afterwards. Sometimes.
Okay, I think okay.
But, so what you're saying is that it might be beneficial to do the obtaining of their work history and education beforehand to develop that rapport?
I think that that's probably the biggest benefit. That's what we found, in order to develop and build that relationship, going through and being able to explain your consent and your email waiver, and then gathering the information, right, where you can actually have conversation with that client, is your ability to hopefully break down those barriers, and then you can help them understand what this is. So when you phone your client, do you give them an idea as to what it is that you're going to be doing? And there's nothing to prepare for. It's a computer-based assessment that's read and click. I mean, is there any of that goes forward when you first call?
Yeah, if I call them, and I try to stay away from saying it's vocational testing. What I'll call it is a vocational assessment, and I'll say that they're going to be assessed in 3 different areas: their interests, their transferable skills that they've acquired over the years, and then there's a timed. I try to stay away from saying the word test because a lot of people don't like that, but there's a timed aptitude portion that you'll be asked to do as well.
I honestly think to be able to maintain, provincially, and just like any random report, that completing our pre-assessment interview first, because that's where we get our authorization for release. Our consent comes in there, our explanation of that, as well as our email waiver. I don't feel it's appropriate to be providing those particular services at the end of our conversation. I think building your rapport, gathering your information first, and again, that we're consistent in not only the process of how we do this, but in everything that we do with regards to particularly for Saskatchewan government insurance, because it is illegal. Ultimately, we could be in an appeal court.
Okay.
Sorry, Leslie, when
Okay, that's all I.
there was ability to
Go ahead, sorry.
file something and then interest checklist?
Sorry, you were breaking up.
You said that the order of the report should be ability profile. What was the second one?
Transferable work content skills,
Thanks.
and then your interest profile, which is the last one.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay, so
Sorry.
we now have Adele and Leon joining us. Leslie, thank you for taking the first half of that. We'll conclude next meeting with Russ's portion and the choices. And I'm just going to stop the video part for a sec. And I'm going to hand it over to Adele and Leon.